New York Times reporter Michael Schmidt. Michael, 1 month ago, you co-wrote a piece for The Times on James Comey's potential influence on the election. In it, you reported early last year, FBI agents received a batch of hacked documents, and one caught their attention. The document was written by a Democratic operative who expressed confidence that Attorney General Loretta Lynch would keep the Clinton email investigation from going too far. According to the report, this prompted Comey to forcefully denounce Clinton's conduct when clearing her, breaking with FBI protocol to say nothing when closing a case. The document had complicated Comey's calculations, believing that if Lynch announced the case was closed and Russia leaked the document, it would raise doubts about the independence of the investigation. Well, this morning, the Washington Post is building upon your reporting, Michael, finding that the document potentially was a fake and potentially was planted by Russian intelligence. The Post reports the FBI later determined the document was bad intelligence, possibly even fake, sent to confuse the Bureau. The Americans mentioned in the Russian document insist they do not know each other, do not speak to each other, and never had any conversations remotely like the ones described in the document. Investigators have long doubted its veracity, and by August, the FBI had concluded it was unreliable. Michael, what more can you tell us about this?
Well, this document is something that folks at the FBI say really provides a rationalization for why Comey did what he did. That he was actually going to hold the press conference before Loretta Lynch had the tarmac incident. Now, when we wrote this story by the Post, cast even more doubt on the document than when we wrote our piece a month ago. Because if you talk to Justice Department officials, they say this is not a big deal. This didn't really didn't say what the FBI thought it was going to say, and this is just the FBI trying to reverse engineer and explain why Comey did what he did. The interesting thing here is that we may actually get some answers because there's a DOJ Inspector General investigation into how Comey handled the email investigation. And this is one of the issues that the Inspector General is looking at. The issue is that a lot of this is classified, and it's not clear how much the Inspector General is going to be able to say publicly about it. If the document is dubious, we will probably learn more about it, and it will hurt Comey's argument for why he held the press conference.
Mark Halperin, let's bring you in here. This is you have enjoyed actually telling us why James Comey has been making horrific mistakes for years now. This one seems to be teed up very high for you. Go.
Well, I mean, there's been an effort both on the record and on background with major news organizations by supporters of former Director Comey to explain and justify what he did last year in interceding in the election in a clear violation of the policies that are supposed to govern in federal criminal probes, like the one he was conducting and the counterintelligence probe. I don't understand, based on what the Washington Post reported, how it is that they ever thought bringing this document up was a good idea, because the Post reporting seems pretty clear that not only does the document on the face of it seem like a very weak justification and rationale for doing what he did, but the Post asserts that the FBI pretty much knew at the time that this document was not the basis to make a serious claim that Comey needed to deviate from clear Justice Department and FBI policy in coming out and denouncing Hillary Clinton unilaterally without coordinating with the Justice Department.
Michael, pursuing the FBI angle in this and the FBI's involvement in this, the timing of the document, it's an email from Debbie Wasserman Schultz to someone who supposedly works for an organization funded by George Soros. Why did it take so long for the FBI to conclude that this document was not authentic, that it was a ruse? I mean, sources, they know the source, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Why did it take so long for them to conclude that it was a fake?
Yeah, the facts here don't look good for the FBI because in the Post story it says they weren't even interviewed by the FBI. They weren't even contacted by them. So if the FBI was so worried about this document, why didn't the FBI go out and talk to them about it? Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about this document that we learned when we were reporting on it is that Lynch didn't know about it at the time. Instead, Comey had his deputy go to the senior-most career person at the Justice Department and talk to them about this, but that Lynch and the political folks that were running the Justice Department didn't know what was going on here. My sense is that there's probably some other stuff here that went on that we don't know about, and there were some interactions between Comey and the Justice Department that we don't know about on this, but as it stands right now, this doesn't really help Comey's argument for why he did what he did.
Also this morning, the New York Times reports American spies, collected information last summer that senior Russian intelligence and political officials were discussing how to exert influence over high-level advisors inside Donald Trump's campaign. The officials they discussed influencing General Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort, both of whom had indirect ties to Russian officials. According to the Times report, some Russians boasted about how well they knew Flynn, while others discussed leveraging their ties to Viktor Yanukovych, the deposed president of Ukraine living in exile in Russia. He at one time had worked closely with Paul Manafort. So at least another morning, another story, this one in the New York Times, about ties between the campaign and Russia. Again, no evidence of collusion, as Donald Trump is quick to point out. But again, one story after another where they keep going back to Russia.
Well, the drip isn't stopping, and this just goes back to the disastrous decision of President Trump to decide to proceed forward with Michael Flynn primarily. You know, it's interesting that he did get rid of Paul Manafort at such a critical time during his campaign. You know, August, managed to cut ties with him. Whatever really went down was bad enough where they decided to make that decision in the middle of a heated campaign season. But the decision to still proceed forward with Mike Flynn is dogging this administration, and it's going to continue to be a huge story over the next couple of years as the investigation proceeds. Michael, just to go back to the recent report about the email that influenced Director Comey's decision to hold the critical press conference about Hillary Clinton. This almost seems as if, you know, the FBI, if they had decided to go forward with the dossier written by former British spy Chris Steele, you know, something that's unsubstantiated, and that a lot of people had concerns that, you know, large parts of it are patently false, while parts of it may be true, you know, may still be proven true. But there was a decision not to go forward with that document, and, you know, how can you, what do you know about that?
About the dossier?
Yes.
I think that the FBI takes the dossier probably a little more seriously than the media has taken. I think the FBI has done a lot of work to try and find out whether the facts in it are true. The FBI was willing to pay the investigator, the private investigator that worked on it, some additional money to come up with more information that backed up that what he had. I think the FBI has looked for some of the sources that he used in his piece. And I think the FBI has used it as a rationalization to open up and look at other avenues in the Russia investigation. And I realized that the dossier on its face, when I first read it, I found it very hard to believe. And it is very salacious, and it can be seen as ridiculous. But at the FBI, I don't think it was dismissed in the way that as many people did in the media. And I think that they continue to look at that document and look at that information as a basis for leads, and as they move forward with their investigation. The problem is that a lot of this stuff is about things that happened in Russia, and the FBI can't just go over to Moscow and set up shop and say, hey, we're going to work from here and find out whether this stuff is true.
And Willie, again, it's context, context, context. Jeff Sessions is a senator from Alabama.
Yeah.
He is on the, I believe, was on the Judiciary Committee, and I believe the Armed Services Committee. He was the only member of his committee reaching out and taking meetings with Russian ambassadors, if I'm not mistaken. He's never, in his past, until he got involved in the Trump campaign, been interested in making contact with Russian diplomats or other Russian officials. Again, it's all context, and it just doesn't add up.